Hi, I'm Kristen Bell. Carvana makes car buying easy. Isn't that right, hun? Dax? Dax?
Sorry, did you know about this 7-day money-back guarantee?
A week to evaluate seat comfiness, you say?
A week of terrain tests? Yeah, I can test the brake pad resistance at variable speeds.
Make sure all the kids' stuff fits nicely.
Make sure our stuff fits nicely.
Oh,
Right. Still need to buy the car. Getting ahead of ourselves here.
Buy your car with Carvana today.
How do you feel joy after a difficult labor and birth that didn't go at all the way you expected? You'll learn how in today's birth story episode with Martha. Welcome to the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. If you're having a baby in the hospital, you are giving birth in a system that too often takes away power from women over what happens in their own bodies. I'm Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, a practicing board-certified OBGYN who's had the privilege of helping well over 1,000 babies into this world. I've been a doctor for over 20 years, and I'm here to help you take back your power, advocate for yourself, and have the beautiful pregnancy and birth that you deserve. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and it's not a substitute for medical advice. Check out the full disclaimer at drnicolerankins.com/disclaimer. Now let's get to it. Hey, real quick, before we get into this episode, my new and improved online birth course, The Birth with Power Pathway, is coming in May. If you want to feel calm, confident, and actually prepared for your hospital birth, this is for you. The best way to be the first to know when it drops, join my email list at drnicolerankins.com/email. Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is episode number 274. Whether it is your first time listening or you've been here before, I'm so grateful that you're spending some time with me today. In today's birth story episode, we have Martha. Martha hoped and really prepared for a low intervention birth with hospital midwives. She ended up being induced at 41 weeks and 3 days due to concerns about her baby's heart rate on a non-stress test. She was in labor for 40 hours and experienced nearly every intervention that she had not wanted during that induction, some of which were hard on her and others of which were hard on her baby. She labored for about 35 hours through 2 nights without an epidural and used nitrous oxide for pain relief before getting an epidural about 5 hours before a non-emergent but medically recommended cesarean birth. The C-section itself was not traumatic, but it was unwanted, and she experienced a lot of grief over the loss of the birthing experience that she wanted. Now, despite that emotional roller coaster, her postpartum experience was actually quite joyful. She had a positive and successful breastfeeding journey, and she felt incredibly bonded with her baby from the second she was born. Martha's story is an example of how joyful and easy postpartum experiences are possible, even when the journey to birth is very challenging. And we are going to get into all of the details of how she was able to do that in this episode today. Now, quick reminder before we dive into the episode, I'm teaching my birth plan class live coming up soon. If you want a birth plan that actually works to help you have the birth that you want, you don't want to miss it. Grab your spot in the next free live class at drnicolerankins.com/birth plan. All right, let's get into the birth story episode with Martha. Thanks so much, Martha, for agreeing to come onto the podcast. I'm excited to have you share your story and, the challenges that came with it and how you overcame those challenges.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to share.
Yeah, so why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your family?
Yeah, so I'm in my less early by the day, but 30s. And I live in the Twin Cities area of Minneapolis with my husband and our daughter. She just turned 1. And yeah, we love living here. We love getting outside. And we recently actually just got back from our first overnight camping trip. with our daughter, which is something that we loved to do before we had her, and finally got back out there, and she did great. It was awesome.
Oh, that's really sweet. That really sounds fun. Yeah. I don't know that I could do the cold weather that I think you experienced there.
Yeah, we have extremes. So as cold as it is in the summer, in the winter, it's hot in the summer. Okay. And both of those come into play in my pregnancy, like super cold and super hot. So
gotcha.
Spans the breadth of it.
Yeah. So speaking of your pregnancy, why don't we get into your pregnancy? Because in order to understand the birth, we got to understand a little bit about the pregnancy. So what was your pregnancy and prenatal care like? Did you see a doctor, a midwife? How did things go during your pregnancy?
Yeah, so I was pretty sick during pregnancy at the beginning and then also at the end.
Okay.
And I was sick really early on, and I was really sick. I found out I was pregnant really early, like before I missed my period. We knew that we were open to pregnancy.
Sure.
And so I found out, at like 3 weeks or whatever. And by like 5 or 6 weeks, I was throwing up like all day, every day. It was rough. I listened to your podcast on hyperemesis recently, what you had like a guest on maybe a while back, but she said like this is beyond like the nausea that you can have a piece of ginger and it goes away. Like this is constantly being on the verge of throwing up, and that's really how it was for me. It was pretty tough, and I had to like work through it too. I was fortunately like working a hybrid kind of corporate job post-COVID with some flexibility for working from home. And so I just worked from home as much as I could, but I was sick constantly. And we tried all sorts. We tried the Unisum and B6 combo. We tried, I threw up so much ginger that I just stopped trying. In the early days, it was almost manageable with like diet and that, but it pretty quickly became like I couldn't keep anything down. I did try acupuncture. Like I tried like everything I could before, kind of the next intervention, which is pretty much the theme for how my birth went also, but I did end up on Zofran. I think I was on like the 8 milligram dose a couple times a day through I stayed on it through my entire pregnancy. Okay. So yeah, on Zofran, it was more like I was throwing up like 2 to 3 times a day. And I was still getting pretty sick, but it was like I could get through the day with the Zofran. Those Minnesota winters, I went for long walks in just like the coldest, brisk cold. Towards the end of my first trimester when I was like well enough to get out of the house, and like that cold air felt like so good for me. But it was tough. I described it to a friend as like being hungover with the stomach flu on a ship at sea in a storm. Like it was just, I was always just unsettled. It was tough.
Oh my God.
It was really tough.
Okay. So, and that did that make it hard for you to connect with your pregnancy?
I've heard that it can. And for me, not really. Like pregnancy was so hard, but I loved that I was pregnant, and I was like tracking the size of the baby, on an app with the fruit, and I was so excited to feel the baby like move and start planning the nursery. I think that was one of the things that kind of like got me through the sickness, is like in my really tough days, I would work on my registry or like, think about the bigger picture. Although I will say not always. Like I had a couple tough days. I remember because I was going in, I was being monitored for like dehydration and weight loss because I just couldn't keep anything down. And I was with hospital midwives, and the midwife was like, "Oh, do you want to hear the baby's heart rate?" And I was like, "Well, is it medically necessary?" And she's like, "No, it would just be kind of reassuring, maybe like put the bright side of spin on things." And I was just like, no. I felt so bad after. I was like, no, if it's not medically necessary, I just want to go home.
Today's not the day. Yeah.
Not today. So I definitely had moments where I was like, oh my gosh, how will I ever get through this? But I still did feel like connected with the pregnancy. And we were waiting to find out if we had a boy or girl until birth. We were a surprise at birth. So that was kind of another fun part of it. It's just like wondering at like who this baby was.
Yeah, that is fun. And you said you were seeing midwives.
Yes. I chose my care team actually before I got pregnant. Kind of found them by accident. I wanted to get my IUD out, which is a whole separate story of having a bad experience with the IUD. But I just took like the first available appointment at this women's clinic that was in the same clinic system that I go to for other care, and that was with a nurse midwife. And so that's how I got introduced to the hospital midwives, and it was a fit for me, like with what I wanted for birth. I wanted as low intervention as possible, and I kind of felt like midwives were a good fit for a low risk pregnancy.
Sure.
But still while also being able to birth in the hospital.
Okay. How many midwives were in the group?
Maybe 15 to 20, a lot. There was a midwife for
really?
Yeah, it's like a big production here actually. They practice across, they're kind of split between like 2 hospitals. And the one that I ended up going through had like 15 to 20 midwives, I think, in rotation.
Wow.
So it's a lot.
That is a very large group. I mean, that's a large group, whether it's physicians or midwives. That's a big group of providers.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Okay. Did you enjoy, and you felt like you got good care by the midwives during your pregnancy?
I do. I feel like I got good care. I have like some mixed reviews, actually. But
okay, why is that?
Well, I think there were just things that kind of got missed through my pregnancy. One thing that came up at birth was that I was super anemic. And I think just going to see like all these different people, like, I was trying to meet as many of them as I could. I kind of had like 1 or 2 that I consider like my primary midwives who I felt like I was more connected with. But I would go in and see these different people, and they'd be interested in a different part of my chart. And, one of them sent us for like a follow-up growth out ultrasound for our baby, and that was kind of like not necessary. And somebody else was interested in our amniotic fluid levels, and nothing ever came of that. People would just kind of get detailed in on like one detail that they hadn't talked to me about yet, and the anemia got a little bit missed up until like the very end. But I was really happy with like the care team, and I think everybody did their best.
Okay. So what did you do to prepare for your birth?
Yeah, what didn't I do? I listened to, I really consumed like birth stories.
Okay.
I listened to this podcast. I listened to Evidence-Based Birth. I listened to the Birth Hour. I read Ina May. I read Birthing from Within. And my husband and I took a birth class together. And by then I kind of felt like I knew a lot of it, but the birth class was still wonderful for like, just that we had dedicated time together to really think about the birth and like what we wanted. And so it was great. And I hired a doula team. So 2, with the idea that like one of them would be there for the birth. And I was really prepared to say no to like every intervention. And then couldn't. So
I was going to say it didn't exactly go that way, but
exactly.
Let me ask you, at what point did you hire your doula team?
Really early, like at the end of my first trimester. We hired a doula team.
And then did they have a couple of visits, like, or what did they do during the pregnancy to support you?
We had a couple of like video visits with them to talk through what we wanted for the birth. They came to our house at the end. The idea was to labor at home for as long as possible. And so we just kind of like went through how we're set up here and like what we could do during labor here. And they sent me a lot of just resources and support, especially at the end. I went pretty far past my due date, and I was just out of my mind physically and mentally. And so they were super supportive for that like waiting time.
Okay. Good. So what are some things that you wanted for your birth?
Yeah, I had like my ideal birth was like, I'm going to go into labor spontaneously, like hopefully early, but I'll let it go for as long as I can. And labor at home for as long as possible, and basically like show up to the hospital to have a baby. Like I didn't want ideally any interventions. I didn't even want an IV. Like I wanted to just have this natural quote birth. I even like at one point considered a home birth. I was like, I don't need any of the hospital interventions. I'm not going to have them. That was like my ideal, but I just wasn't comfortable with the home birth. We didn't seriously consider it, but we live like across the street from a hospital, so I was like, maybe we could do it. But I just was more comfortable in the hospital setting for myself. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah, low intervention. Wanted to go as long as I could without pain medicine or like without the epidural specifically.
Right.
And in particular, just wanted to avoid like the cascade of interventions that you hear about.
Sure.
I didn't want to end in a C-section, and I didn't want to end in an unnecessary C-section even more so. So I was very focused on like preventing that outcome.
Okay. Now, were you open to the possibility that those things could happen, or were you just like, this is what I'm going to do, this is how it's going to go? Like, where was your mindset?
I would say it evolved as I got to the end of pregnancy, but it never, up until the end, I didn't really think about another outcome. I just like envisioned myself going into labor at home and like having this labor. I never thought that I would need to be induced, and that is what ended up happening. And I didn't consider what I would do if I had to be induced. I had heard all these birth stories, so like I knew what the options were. I knew what could happen. I felt very aware of like all the interventions that could happen and like why they might be recommended, but I just didn't think that I was going to get to that place.
Okay. So was there anything that you were afraid of when it came to giving birth, other than having to have all the interventions?
Honestly, I feel like I went into birth kind of on the lower end of the fear spectrum. I don't know. My mom we have four kids in my family. I think she had all of us or most of us like unmedicated. She was like, I just wanted a Tylenol. Like she had this like easy burst, I don't know.
Right.
But I just didn't think that much about the birth itself being like a problem for me. I was more worried about like postpartum and healing, and I knew it was going to hurt. I knew it was going to be intense, but I wasn't like afraid of it.
Okay. So then what happened with your labor and birth? I guess we can start off. You said you ended up being induced. How did it come to be for that?
Yeah. So one thing relevant, I think, from end of pregnancy is that I had really severe restless legs. This kind of leads
tell
into
us
the
about
story.
that. Yeah.
It was awful. Like, I have gone back and forth on if I'd rather have the puking or the restless legs, and like I might take the puking. Like, it was just hard to. I couldn't sleep at all.
I would stay up.
I would stay up like into the like early hours of the morning most nights at the end of my pregnancy, and then kind of like finally crash. It was tough, and that went on for like a few months, like almost my whole third trimester. That was one of the signs looking back that I was pretty anemic that just got like missed. And we again like tried to treat it with like magnesium and massage and I did acupuncture again, like all of these things. And I think it was just like anemia. I was also like eating so much ice. I was craving I just ate ice all day.
Do you know how low your blood count was?
I do. When I went into labor, it was around 8.
Okay.
Like the iron hemoglobin scale. And then when I gave birth, it was under 8. It was 7 point something.
Okay.
It was pretty low.
Yeah. Do you know if they checked it? We often check it at the same time we do the blood sugar test. Did they check it then?
They did, and it was around 10 then. So I think the normal range is like 13 to 15, like maybe a little lower for pregnancy is what they told me. And then by the end, I actually had another blood test done to test for cholestasis because I had like some other I had like itchy feet related to the restless legs, and so they ran some more blood work, and it was lower then. It was around like 8 or 9. But at that point, I think that the midwife that I met with said that dietary supplements would be like the best option for me. She's like, eat your leafy greens, cook in a cast iron skillet. I think there was some concern because I was getting sick again at the end of pregnancy of like me being able to actually tolerate taking an iron supplement without making myself sicker. And so it was kind of hard to manage.
Okay.
But nobody really knew like how anemic I was until labor started. So
Gotcha.
So I was pretty uncomfortable at the end of pregnancy. I was not sleeping well, and I was still really wanting to avoid an induction though. Like I wanted to just go for as long as I could. But as I got close to my due date, I started talking to the midwives of like, well, what would it look like to go post-dates? They said at 42 weeks, they would need to refer me out to the OB practice. Like, I couldn't stay with the midwife care anymore.
Right.
And I didn't want to go to 42 weeks anyway. I wasn't comfortable with the risks of going past 42 weeks.
Right.
And so I kind of started to think, like, around my due date, like, well, if I don't go into labor on my own, I would rather be induced with the midwives than go to 42 weeks. And so we tentatively scheduled an induction for 41 weeks and 4 days, which was like an end of Saturday at the end of the week, 41 weeks to be induced. And they were comfortable with letting me go that long if I did non-stress tests during that 41st week. So I did ask them I hadn't wanted to do membrane sweeping, but I did ask them to try, like, once I passed my due date. I just felt like if I was going to go for induction, I wanted to feel like I'd done everything I could.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
To get labor started. But when they tried to sweep my membranes, she was like, so your cervix is really soft, but it's closed. I was like, oh, like not dilated at all. And I hadn't had any early labor, so I didn't really expect to be, but it was just like, okay, well, that's not an option then. And we tried that again, actually, at like the 41-week appointment, and again, like, wasn't dilated at all. So that kind of takes us, I guess, through the very end of my pregnancy. I was going out of my mind, just ready for this baby, and exhausted and all of the things. But at 41 weeks, did the first non-stress test, and we did a biophysical profile with that. That was fine. We went back at 41 weeks and 3 days, which was the Friday before my scheduled induction.
Okay.
And the night before had been really tough with, like, the restless legs. Like, I just remember going into that appointment being like, I've been up all night. Like, I spent the early hours of the morning crying with my husband. Like, it's really seeming like we're heading for this induction that I don't want, and we just kind of had a cry together and came to terms with what was happening. And he's like, well, let's get through this appointment. We'll get some dinner. We'll, like, tuck in for rest tonight. We'll do whatever you want tomorrow and then go for this induction. And I know you don't want it, but we're going to meet our baby soon. And it's like, okay. But when we went in for the non-stress test, it wasn't as good anymore at that appointment. So 41 weeks, 3 days. I could kind of tell that it wasn't, like, the movements that I was supposed to be tracking just weren't as consistent as they had been earlier in the week. And then they were seeing some variable decelerations from the fetal tracing. So our midwife was, she was like one of our primary ones that we saw that day. And she's like, I think we want to induce you right away, actually, given how the non-stress test went. I think it's your best chance at still having a vaginal birth.
Right.
And I was like, right now? I just couldn't, I was like, I just remember feeling exhausted. I'm like, you're going to send me to go to labor, like, right now?
Right.
And she's like, yes. So we did, and I think that was kind of the start of, for me, like, motherhood happens whether you're ready or not. And that's been such a theme for me. With our daughter. Like, it doesn't matter if you're rested. It doesn't matter if you feel ready. Like, it keeps going at its own pace whether you want to or not. So, yeah. So we headed over for induction, and it was 41 weeks, 3 days pregnant, and kicked off the labor from there.
And you're tired, and this is, again, not just induction, but, like, even that wasn't when you had thought it was gonna happen. So, I mean, what was your mental space like? I mean, where were you going into the hospital? Like,
I I was accepting that it was time to get labor started. And I didn't want to I didn't want to go to 42 weeks. I knew it was only one day early, but I was just kind of in disbelief that it was happening. But I was also excited. Like, I was excited to meet our baby. And finally got to tell, like, friends, family, like, yes, we are finally going to have this baby, because of course they'd all been so curious of like, yep, we're starting induction now.
Gotcha.
And I had prepped them like this could be a long process, you know. So I was, I just remember being exhausted but excited.
Okay. All right. So then how did the induction go?
It was long. So it was long. I got through triage. And I guess one piece is like, I kind of knew like already we had gone over birth preferences with the midwife team. And I really appreciated, like, they set a whole appointment to sit down and like go through our birth preferences with us.
Okay.
And I remember the midwife like reading it line by line and like looking me right in the eye and being like, you know, like I really felt like she was reading what we wanted.
Sure.
But we had kind of laid out preferences, you know, of like plan A, ideal birth, and then like if that doesn't work, then this. But I kind of felt like we were already crossed off a few of the things from plan A. I had actually they have water birth possibility at this hospital. And, they have, like, these huge tubs in the middle of the room, and you can birth in water with the midwife group, and I was open to that. I had signed the waiver to do that, and already with induction, that was, like, not going to be an option. And I hadn't wanted, you know, the IV or all these medications, and just, like, already we're into Plan B. Is just taking it as it came at that point. They gave me the option between starting with Cervidil or Cytotec for the ripening, because I wasn't dilated at all. And they're like, it's really personal preference. And I just remember being like, how would I possibly have a preference about this? I don't know. I called my doula, and she suggested, you know, or we kind of talked through, well, like, Cytotec is a pill, Cervidil is inserted. If you have a really bad reaction to Cervidil, like, it is kind of reversible in that way, versus once you've taken a pill, you're kind of on the roller coaster. And that made sense to me. So I agreed to the Cervidil, and the midwife and the nurse, kind of told me, like, hopefully you tuck in. Some people have mild discomfort with this, and see you in the morning, and we'll start your labor really in the morning. So I was like, okay. And they gave me a sedative and a Tylenol, and they're like, sweet dreams. And this was around like 7 to 8 p.m. on that Friday night. And so my husband and I weren't quite ready for bed yet. We played a game of cribbage. We had packed games, you know, in case we were induced. Like, we were ready for induction. We just didn't want it.
Sure.
We had cribbage with us. We played one game of cribbage, which I won. And by the end of it, which is like, I mean, it takes like 30 minutes. And by the end of it, I was in pain, like a lot of pain. I was really antsy for the game to be done so I could just get up and move around. And the nurse came in to check on me. I was doing wireless monitoring for both fetal heart tones and uterine contractions. And the uterine contraction monitor really never picked up adequately contractions for me. And this was kind of the start of that, of like, it was nothing like what I thought a contraction or that early labor would feel like. And I didn't see anything happening on the monitor. And so the nurse was like, well, are you having contractions? And I'd be like, I don't think so. Like, I'm seeing this flat monitor. Like, I thought contractions would have like a start, middle, and end, you know, that peak. And this was constant. It felt like constant, like, back pain. Right. And it was moderate pain. I remember the nurse asking me to rate it, and in my mind, I was like 7 out of 10. And then out of my mouth, I was like, well, probably a 3. Like, I didn't want to, like, acknowledge. I was like, I'm not even in labor. I kept saying to my husband, like, I have to get it together. I'm not even in labor. And I remember, like, I kept digging my fist into my back because I was just, like, really feeling, like, a lot of pressure in my back. And it was really uncomfortable. So the nurse stayed with us and kind of realized that I was having some like early contractions, like amidst all of this pain. Like there were like little peaks, and that seems like contractions. And so she was like, well, I'd like you to move through a labor circuit. And she set up like a bouncy ball and like a yoga mat, and wanted me to lean over the tub and spend like 20 minutes in each position. And she was great for a labor support nurse, like amazing. But I just remember looking at her and being like, you have to be out of your minds. Like, I've taken a sedative. I thought I was going to go to sleep. And now you're like, actually, we're going to do a labor circuit. Like, I just couldn't believe. I could not believe what they were saying to me of, like, you have to, like, go through this labor now. But eventually I was like, well, I'm not going to rest. Like, I'm not comfortable. So I put on, like, some noise-canceling headphones and started to listen to some music. And Taylor Swift had just released one of her album re-records. And so I like put that on. I was like, gonna be in my little zone. And then not even 2 songs in to this, like, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get in the zone. And the nurse came back in and she's like, well, so baby is looking really sleepy on the monitor. And this is actually something that I hadn't really heard of in, like, other birth stories. Like, I'd heard of, like, decelerations and, like, other indicators of fetal distress, but I guess they weren't happy with, like, the movements of the baby. They kept calling, you know, sleepy baby. So, I don't know, like, they just weren't happy.
It's probably like the heart rate. We like to see it jump up and down, and maybe it was flatter.
That's what they were showing us, like, this, like, more flat, flat monitor. And they wanted me to do an IV fluid bolus for that. And I knew that I had, like, potentially options. I was like, well, could I do something else instead? Could I drink a juice or ice water? And trying to just delay the interventions at that point. And she's like, well, no, like, we really would recommend the fluid bolus. So it's like, okay. So I agreed to that, and I had to sit in bed or sit near the bed to have that done, so it was kind of disrupted in my circuit, but got through it, and baby's heart rate picked up enough that I could, you know, get out of bed. And we started walking the halls that night, and it was just ramping up for me, and I couldn't really articulate to anybody what was going on. I did have moments where the pain would, like, stop me in my tracks, or that I really had to focus and, like, breathe through. But I didn't think I was in labor. I just thought that I just kept saying, like, I'm uncomfortable. And I wasn't in active labor. I was just having, like, a pretty intense response to the Cervidil. And it was really uncomfortable. So by around, like, 1 in the morning, it's like, this isn't working for me. I need to rest. Like, if you're gonna get me into labor tomorrow, like, this has not been a good fit for me with the Cervidil. I want to take it out. And they were pretty reluctant to do that, but a midwife and her student came in, and they could see that I was, like, really uncomfortable. They had brought in the nitrous oxide, too, at that point. They were like, why don't you try resting with the nitrous? And I kind of did, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to rest like this. Like, this isn't the right medication for me. I will try something else. Just give me, like, an hour. I need a break. I felt like I was having no break at all. And so they're like, well, why don't we check you? And they did, and it was about 2 in the morning, and I remember the midwife saying, like, the exam is unchanged. And I just really remember, like, looking out over the parking garage and being like, I should jump off the roof, because then it was really intense. Like, it was like, I was like, then somebody will help me. Like, that was the logic was, like, so clear in my mind. Like, I didn't want to, like, die. I was just like, if I jumped off the roof, somebody then would give me the medical attention that I need. Like, it was intense. And then just knowing that, like, the exam hadn't changed, like, all night, and it was, like, crushing. I just remember feeling that was the lowest point of my labor. Just crushed of, like, oh my gosh. But something else happened during the exam, which was that they accidentally pulled the Cervidil out. And then they were debating, like, can we put it back in? Do we need to start a new one? I was like, nobody's starting any new Cervidil. Like, no, nothing's going back in. Like, no, we're done with that. It's like, I will start Cytotec in an hour. I just want a break. And they were like, you can have the rest of the night. We'll come back in the morning and get some rest. Like, I just wasn't handling it well, I think mentally or physically.
Okay.
And so I took a shower. I got into bed. I got with, like, the nitrous. And, like, it was really helpful. Although some people had told me, like, maybe don't use the nitrous so early in labor if you want to use it later. I just got a little bit of conflicting advice of, like, save your pain management tools for later in labor.
Right.
And then others who were like, well, make yourself as comfortable as possible. So I didn't know quite what to do, but I did end up using the nitrous that night. And I'm really glad that I did, because I got into, like, a rhythm, like a breathing rhythm, where I could, like, really identify, like, oh, these are contractions and they are coming regularly.
Right.
And I timed them on my phone, and they were 2 minutes apart, lasting a minute.
Okay.
For the duration of, like, the night. That went on to, like, 6 in the morning.
Okay. So did you get any sleep?
I didn't sleep, but I will say, like, I did have the experience of, like, deep rest between contractions. Like, I got myself set up where, like, the nitrous mask was near my face, and I could kind of breathe through the peak of the contraction and then, like, fall into, like, a little bit of rest.
Right.
But not like, dedicated sleep.
Okay.
And my contraction tracking app also kept telling me to go to the hospital. It's like, it's time to go. It's like, oh,
I'm here.
But yeah, it was just surreal. But I felt like I was getting on top of it, and I understood what was happening. So Saturday was a lot more straightforward. Like, the midwives came in and sat with me, and it was a new midwife, and she was like, I was kind of concerned from your overnight notes that maybe you weren't, like, coping well, but you seem fine. And I was like, I feel fine. Like, I was having these contractions, but I felt like I had it under control, and I was ready to start the cytotech. And then over the course of the morning, I was nervous about the cytotech, but I think they wanted me to do, like, 4 doses over the course of the day, like, every couple hours.
Right.
And it was fine for me. So my contractions spaced out, like, every 5 minutes, like, clearly identifiable, mild to moderate contractions. It felt a lot more like what I anticipated early labor would be like. I could move. I got out of bed. I was in there's a rocking chair in the room. I sat in that for a while. I listened to a podcast. My husband was resting with me. I would have a contraction, and he would kind of, like, sit up to attention and just, like, be with me. And then we'd go back to, like, doing our own thing. And it was a good day. Like, Saturday was a good day. Our doula came by. I think they didn't want to, like, be with us the whole time because it's such a long induction, which we were fine with. Like, we had such good care from the nurses too, who were helping us through all these things, and my husband as well. But one of them stopped by to, like, get us set up with some activities or, like, things to try. A nurse came in the middle of the day, though, or a midwife came in, and she was, like, kind of going through my chart, and she was like, how did you get so anemic? She was giving me a lot of feedback on, like, you should have treated this differently.
And you're like, well, how can I treat something I didn't know about? Like,
I was like, I've been under your team's care. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know. They told me to eat my leafy greens, and she's like, I never would have treated it that way. And it's like, well, I just was so frustrated. I was like, well, it's a little late for that, isn't it?
Yeah, like, what?
Yeah, what am I supposed to do?
Right. That's frustrating.
It was frustrating. And then she had also reviewed, like, what had happened overnight, and she's like, I think taking the Cervidil out was a mistake. It's like,
ma'am, what do you want me to do? Go back and
thank you.
Like,
I was like stuck up for myself. I was like, I 100% know it was the right choice for me to take the Cervidil out. So, but I was just frustrated of, like, well, that's not helpful.
Right.
But apart from that, like, over the course of the day, Saturday, like, contractions gradually getting, like, longer, stronger, closer together, like you hear happens. And it kind of seems like it was going okay. But we had a couple of instances, again, with, like, sleepy baby or, like, fetal decels, where I think I did one more, like, fluid bolus that day. And then they wanted me to skip the last dose of cytotech to try to get labor moving faster because of the, like, how it was going for the baby.
Sure.
So Saturday night, I was like just barely a centimeter dilated.
Okay.
And it was like my primary midwife was on call again that night. And she suggested getting started with a balloon catheter. And I went back and like kind of checked some of the chart notes. I think there's a couple kinds you can get. The notes say Cook catheter. I thought it was called Foley. I don't know.
Yeah, they're two different ones. They work similarly, but they're just designed differently.
Yeah, and I had heard of them before, but essentially the idea being like an inflatable catheter that puts pressure on the cervix. And so we did that.
Okay.
That was placed, we had dinner, and then she came and placed it like maybe around like 9 or 10 p.m.
Okay.
And again, people told me, like, hopefully you can just sleep through this. And again, that's not what happened. Like, I couldn't sleep through it at all. And some other, one of our other nurses was like, actually, now is usually a good time to call the doula, like, once you've had the balloon placed. So I just didn't know what to expect.
Sure.
Having it placed was pretty intense. Not something that I would want to repeat if possible.
Right.
But for me, it was pretty intense to have it placed. I used the nitrous oxide during the placement procedure. And then once it was in, like, my labor picked up really quickly.
Okay.
And really at a new level. Like, the previous night, I was like, well, that really was a 3. This is actually a 7, like, it was like, okay, these are intense. Like, these contractions are long. They are strong. They are taking 100% of my focus to get through these contractions. Our nurse who was on that night was awesome. Like, she gave me an aromatherapy patch, and they tried to fill up the tub for me to labor in, but there wasn't any hot water, I guess. So that my husband tried to fill it up with like a pitcher of hot water from the coffee station, but it didn't work. So we tried. I labored with the nitrous. Our doula did come. But those contractions were really intense, like taking 100% focus to just breathe through them.
Gotcha.
And the balloon came out around like 1 or 2 in the morning. So it was intense, but it was kind of fast. Like, I was prepared for it to be in overnight, but it came out earlier. Which meant that I was like between 3 to 4 centimeters dilated. And at that point, I'd been there for over 24 hours. So that felt like a huge win. I remember everybody like celebrating, like, this balloon is out. So they turned on the Pitocin at that point.
Okay.
And that really took my labor to like the upper level of what I could handle, I would say. These contractions were like, I remember telling the midwife, like, these are getting to be a 10 out of 10.
Right.
This is really intense.
Yeah.
And they were on top of each other. I would have like 30 seconds in between. And they were long, and they really required me to vocalize through.
Okay.
And I honestly wasn't prepared for that. Of like, I kind of felt like I had to vocalize through.
Okay.
Meaning, like, I couldn't like get air in. Like, I just would like have to like moan through these contractions.
Gotcha.
And my husband said it was like somebody like coming up for air, being like a huge gasp in at the end. And
interesting.
It was hard. It was one of the things I felt unprepared for. It's just like, I just thought I'd breathe through my contractions.
Right,
and I never
right.
thought like what would happen if that didn't feel accessible to me.
Sure.
And I'm definitely somebody who's forgotten the actual pain of labor. Like, I really couldn't recall it, but I remember the feeling of feeling like crushed, almost like I just like my
crushed
hurt. Yeah, like a weight like all around me. Of like that's how it really felt. Of, like, being like so squeezed, and I felt it a lot in my back. And
Okay.
They were intense.
Okay.
And around like 4 in the morning is when I remember starting to say, like, I don't want to do this anymore. And this was a level of labor that I thought would happen closer to like transition of like end stages of labor. Birth is close, and I wasn't close, and I knew that I wasn't close.
Okay.
And I just couldn't imagine like continuing to labor like that and you're not supposed to do like the labor math, but it was kind of clear that it wasn't picking up, like quickly enough for dilation. Like I knew birth wasn't close. And I was like, I don't want to do this all day. Into even like Monday, maybe. Like it's now Sunday morning. Like this baby might not even be born today. And so I started talking to my husband and my doula about an epidural. Agreed to like a cervical check. Like let's confirm like what's going on. And if there hasn't been progress, I'm ready for the pain relief. And so we did that check just before like 5 a.m, and I was still 4 centimeters. Like, yes, everything else was the same too. Like fetal position hadn't changed, effacement hadn't changed. Like I had labored all night and nothing had changed. And I was like, yep, epidural, I'm ready. So got the epidural. I was pretty scared to get the epidural, but the anesthesiologist was incredible. I just felt like I was going to move during it. And he acknowledged, he's like, can we turn the Pitocin down? Like, these contractions are on top of each other. And the nurse was like, it's off. Like, it's been off. Like, I just had like a huge reaction to the Pitocin and like no dilation from it. It wasn't, it just didn't work for me, I guess. Or like I didn't give it enough time, or anyway.
So did the epidural provide some relief then?
100%. Like it was, I felt nothing after the epidural. Like it worked. I remember it working immediately, and I fell asleep.
I was going to say, you were probably exhausted.
I was exhausted and like finally just like got some relief. So just fell asleep. And then kind of through the course of that morning, nurses came in and like got me in different positions. I got the epidural probably like, I think it was like 35 hours into the induction. And then by mid-morning, we were just getting stuck. We were starting to have like late decelerations on the fetal heart rate. And every time we turned up the Pitocin. And the Pitocin never got past like a 1 or a 2 dose. Like I was always on a very low dose of Pitocin. I just had a big response to it. And it was really hard on the baby. And so we kind of got stuck where like we couldn't turn up the Pitocin, and my body wasn't close to being able to push this baby out. So mid-morning, like they started to talk to me about a C-section. And I was just like devastated. I really wanted this experience of like pushing out my baby and like, I'd kind of like prepared for like this whole thing, and like that feeling of it just sinking in of like this experience that I thought I would have, like I'm not gonna have it. And I'm gonna have to do this C-section, which I'm terrified of. But I also knew that like we were stuck. There wasn't we couldn't get labor to progress.
Oh, did they ever try and break your water?
They did. Yep. Saturday morning we broke my water. I had to have the like internal monitor placed too for contractions like early in the morning, because my contractions were intense. Like once they placed the internal monitor, they were like, I think they were tracking it like 2 minutes long. Like they were substantial, but not producing any like dilation during that either, and just like stressing out the baby. So we broke water, and I really felt at that point that I was on the cascade of interventions, that it was like, this is everything I wanted to avoid that's all happening. But I didn't know like anything else that I could have done either. Like I just felt like we were stuck. So they sent in an OB to consult with us. And we knew that we were going to head for a C-section, and we were crying, and she came in, and sometimes I get emotional when I talk about her, which is funny because like I didn't really like her. Like I just didn't find her very likable, unfortunately. But she delivered our baby, and so I have a lot of like respect for how she handled it at the same time. But I remember her coming in and being like, no more tears. Like, we're about to have a baby. And I was like, okay. Exactly. Like, no more tears. We're about to have a baby. And, it was like, I didn't love that, but I also think it was kind of what we needed. Like, that energy was what we, like, needed to get through it. And she came and, like, she sat, like, right next to me and explained what was going on. And I think, like, majorly to her credit, she was like, this isn't an emergency. We're just stuck. Like, if birth were imminent, we could, like, crank up the Pitocin and, like, try to get this baby out. But it's not. And we have no way to get you there at this point. So, like, C-section is the safest mode of delivery.
Right.
And she explains that they had, like, a clear drape so they could lower the drape and I could, like, see the baby be born. And I actually told her, like, I actually don't want that. Like, I don't want to see that. I was so scared. And she was like, you know, we'll just see how we feel when we're in there. Like, let's just see how it goes. Like, she didn't say, like, okay, we won't do it. She was like, we'll see how it goes when we're in there. So got prepped and got taken back, and I was scared, and I think my husband was really scared, but just kind of had to do it anyway. So the epidural was, like, perfect. I didn't feel anything.
Oh, good.
Our other doula came for the C-section as well.
Okay.
And it was quick. Like, it was a quick, uncomplicated procedure. She did comment on my anemia as we were going into surgery. She was like, oh, didn't eat your leafy greens, I see.
You're like, I swear to God, I'm going to slap somebody in this hospital if they say one more thing about anemia.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. And I just think my husband, like, really defended me in that moment. I was like, look, I really have been trying. And he's like, look, Martha has had a very difficult time. Like, he had just, like, finally was like, we're done hearing about the anemia. And so I appreciated that. But of course, just, like,
oh my gosh,
one more person at the edge of, like, this huge surgery being like, oh, I guess you didn't eat enough leafy greens. And it's like, lady, I have been trying so hard. But so we went back for the C-section, and it was just, like, a few minutes. I think we started, like, 11:15, and our daughter was born at 11:29. They asked us.
Oh, how did you find out if it was a boy or girl?
Yeah, so they asked us to, like, call it on the way back to the OR, and we both said that we thought it was a girl. And then my husband was able to, like, call it when the baby was born.
Aww.
And that's because they did drop the drape.
Okay.
Like, the OB did not listen to my preferences, and it was the best thing. It was, like, the best preference that had to be ignored because, I mean, it was just as, like, she had described it to me. Like, I could clearly see that my daughter was being taken out of my body, but I couldn't see anything gory, and it was amazing. Like, I saw her eyes open for the first time. It was incredible. It was such a good decision. I'm really happy that, like, they did that for me. And I just couldn't believe it. Like, that was like, oh, it's been you this whole time. And my husband was like, it's a girl. And, yeah, it was just kind of, it's world shifting, you know, like, your baby is there and you're looking right at them. And in that moment, like, really nothing else matters.
Gotcha.
So they, you know, cut the cord, and they got her cleaned up. She had meconium on her. Okay. I had asked them, I was like, they asked if we had wishes they could honor for us during the C-section. I was like, oh, well, we wanted to keep her vernix on. And the nurse was like, honey, she's not going to have any vernix on her. She's 12 days late. Like, she's probably going to be covered in her own poop. And I was like, oh, okay. And she was, which was fine. It's like, yeah, I was so prepared for all these, like, crunchy, you know, things. And she's like, you know, that's not the reality. So
did they do skin to skin in the OR?
They offered to, but I had another moment where it's like, I couldn't believe that they were trying to give me this baby. I was like, I loved her so much.
Sure,
you do not hand me that baby. Like, I'm not ready. Like, no. They're like, Mom, do you want to hold your baby? And I was like, no.
Martha.
No, like, what are you talking about? No, I'm exhausted. I've been through this whole thing. They offered a few times. Like, they really were so supportive. But every time, you know, and then I was like, I was throwing up at the end of the surgery. I was, like, really shaky. And the throwing up part, the nurse was, you know, trying to comfort me. And I was like, I've got this part down. I've been throwing up this whole pregnancy.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
okay. So the surgery itself wasn't too terrible.
No, it was fine. Like, I had, like, a perfect epidural. I couldn't feel anything. I felt sick at the end, but it was, like, it was fine. I was anxious for it to be done because I was very nervous to have I don't know, just knowing that you're like open on the table and stuff.
Sure.
I was anxious for it to be done, but it went fine. No complications. And minimal blood loss, which was good because I didn't have a lot extra.
We're already, yes. And then I guess quickly, as we're getting up on time, how was the postpartum experience for you?
It was incredible. Like I was really well supported. I did have high blood pressure postpartum. That got flagged at a home visit a couple days after we got home from the hospital. They sent like a nurse out.
Oh, really?
It was part of our care. It was awesome. I had really good care. I was seen at home by a home nurse at 5 days postpartum, 2 days after the hospital. And then I had a 10-day postpartum.
Was that part of... was that part of your insurance, or that's what your practice? Like, where'd that come from?
It was covered by my insurance and part of my practice. It was like, I don't know exactly what the billing is, but it's part of like their standard services. Is like a home.
I wonder if it's something in your state that I've never seen. Okay.
It could be. I know that I have other friends, like here locally at least, who were offered this. I've never heard about like, if this happens other places, but I've had friends who have like declined the visit. They're like, no, I'm good, but we opted into it. I mean, we had to pay like the out-of-pocket piece of it, but it was covered by insurance, and it was home health visit for me and baby. So it was awesome. Like the nurse like weighed our baby and like checked out our like sleep setup, and also found out that I had postpartum high blood pressure. And that was definitely a scary like day. We ended up in the ER. My blood pressure was like 163 over 115. It was high. It was scary. We were really scared. But it was ultimately treatable. It wasn't preeclampsia. They did blood work. I had like a whole workup done. We had to take our 5-day-old back to the hospital, and it was intense, but I healed, and I'm off the blood pressure medications now. I was only on them for like a month and resolved. And I like to say that like I had this really difficult pregnancy, but my postpartum was so joyful. Like it wasn't easy. The healing, like physically and mentally, was really tough. But I just felt so supported. Like I had like my husband and family and friends, and I found a new moms group that I went to, and like a yoga practice that I was doing with my baby, and like I just felt supported that I could like really heal and get through it. And we did have a successful breastfeeding journey as well. And I know that was a big fear of mine, of like after a C-section, what will be possible or like easy for me. And I didn't do skin to skin until like an hour after she was born. I didn't spend that like early time with her. And we had a successful breastfeeding journey anyway. She was on the boob for like 9 months, and then I pumped for a year, and it went really well anyway. So
I mean, I'm just amazed at how, because I mean, quite honestly, it to me it seems like almost nothing went the way that you were intending. Whether it was, I mean, you weren't hoping to puke your guts out the whole time, the restless leg, anemia, and people repeatedly bringing up anemia during your labor, and then like, I mean, the induction, and then the pain. I mean, it even postpartum, like having to take your baby back to the hospital 5 days after, that's not fun either. So I mean, just do you think it was the support that just helped you kind of keep going through what our child, and I think it's wonderful, but I'm hoping, what can you share that you felt help you best cope through the challenges?
I think it was the support, because it really was like I almost had a harder time, I think, mentally after the birth than physically. And it was like I needed my husband's help getting out of bed, like all of that stuff that comes with a C-section. He helped me with every breastfeeding feeds. Like I couldn't even move her from like one side to the other. I didn't have the core strength, and like he helped me with every feed in those early days. And we had, the midwives came to round on us after birth, and one of them said, like, you should process this birth. Like, together and separately. I had a therapist, you know, she's like, it's a lot. Like what you don't, it's not just like, you know, a medical procedure. Like you've been through a lot. Like make sure you take the time to really process it. And it has been like a lot. I really felt like everybody was placating me in the early days. They were like, oh, you did so amazing. Like you've been through so much. And I just felt like they were like doing lip service to me of like, you don't know, you know, I felt like a failure kind of like I didn't have this like physiologic birth that I had wanted. And it took me a while to kind of get past that. But I was so supported that like I have so many positive memories from the postpartum period. And I will say that I read a book like a few months ago, actually. Like my daughter was about 9 months old, but it's called Eve. And it's nothing like what it sounds like, but it's a natural history of human evolution through the lens of the female body. And I just like that kind of content in general. So I like listened to this audiobook, and it makes a really like strong case that midwifery and obstetrics would have been an early adapted skill or like trait in human biology because of the way we give birth. Like we've kind of always needed help. And that really helped me reframe that birth intervention isn't unnatural. Like this is part of being human is having help through this part of life. And it always has been that way. Because I would have a lot of intrusive thoughts of like, well, what if we were in the wild? You know, would we both just be dead? Or like maybe we both would have been fine and none of this had to happen. Like, and I would get kind of stuck in that kind of thinking. And reading this book really helped me reframe that piece of it to understanding that intervention is okay. It is overused, but it's part of being a human.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Then as we wrap up, what would you say is your one favorite piece of advice that you would tell other women who are about to have a baby?
Well, I always say I would never give advice to a pregnant person because I would never want advice. But I will say that after birth, skin to skin is regulating for both of you, like for both baby and the parent. And it was almost like a medicine for me of when I would feel so really overwhelmed of like my husband would be like, okay, skin to skin. And like, it really is co-regulating. It's not just for your baby, like it's for you too. And that continued like well after we came home from the hospital of like having that skin to skin was just so helpful for me. Sure.
Well, Martha, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and share your story. I mean, just so many points and things to take into account, and just the way you navigated what was very challenging is just really admirable, and I know people are going to learn from hearing your experience, so thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, of course, wasn't that a great episode? I so appreciate Martha coming on to share her story today. Now, after every episode, when I have a guest on, I do something called Dr. Nicole's Notes, where I talk about my top takeaways from the conversation. And here are my Dr. Nicole's notes from my conversation with Martha. Number 1, hyperemesis, nausea and vomiting in pregnancy. It can be no joke, all right? And if you want to learn more about strategies to deal with hyperemesis, then listen to episode 219 of the podcast. I interviewed someone from the Hyperemesis Education and Research Foundation. They have so many research-backed strategies and ways to approach hyperemesis and nausea and vomiting in pregnancy. So do check out that episode if you're having trouble. It's drnicolerankins.com/episode 219. Number 2 is you can want a low intervention birth and still be in the hospital. I get incredibly frustrated when I see doctors say, well, if you don't want us to do anything, well, why are you in the hospital? You can want to be in the hospital because you know that that is the location of all of the advanced technologies. That's where there's going to be a NICU. That's where there's going to be an operating room. That's where there's going to be medications and things available in the event of emergency. Now, just because you don't want those things obviously to happen, you may feel better and more at ease being close to those things if need be. So if you hear any pushback about like, why don't you want us to do anything, or why you're here if you don't want us to do anything, please ignore that. Please tell them that you are in the hospital because you want to have access to things if needed, not because you are expecting that something has to be done. You can absolutely have a low intervention birth in the hospital. Okay, next couple things. I just really wanted to fight someone about the repeated comments about her anemia. So unnecessary and just absolutely ridiculous. I'm really, really sorry that she had to deal with that, because that was completely unacceptable. And then the final thing I'll say is that postpartum help, I've said this before, it's like a broken record at this point. It's so important in this country, but also so very, very lacking. Yes, you need to educate yourself during pregnancy and birth. All of that is very important, but preparing for the postpartum period is really important as well. And having that help and support available is important. So whether that's friends or whether you have family member there, you can definitely consider hiring a postpartum doula. I've seen lots and lots more folks, if they don't use a birth doula, they're using a postpartum doula. And I think there's a misconception about postpartum doulas that, oh my gosh, I can't afford it, I can't do this. But you'd be surprised at how you could potentially work out things like where they come maybe just once a week. They don't necessarily have to come every day. They can come once a week and provide a lot of support and education. So do check out potentially having a postpartum doula as well to help you fill in the gaps with that postpartum support. All right, so there you have it. Please share this podcast with a friend and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to me right now. Also, leave a review in Apple Podcast. I love to hear what you think about the show. It also helps the show to grow and it helps other women to find the show as well. Do come join me live in my next free birth plan class. Sign up, grab your spot. Spots are limited. Grab your spot at drnicolerankins.com/birth plan. So that's it for this episode. Do come on back next week and remember that you deserve a beautiful pregnancy and birth.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles Mackenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.